Adventurous kids explore with education and learning what a wild life is in the Everglades. I want to explore the museum of discovering science. What plants do butterflies like? I want to know about Key West. Adventurous kids, learning and fun. Adventurous kids!
Today I'm going to tell you about the Great Depression. The Great Depression was a time of great economic crisis during the 1930s. It ranked as the worst and longest period of widespread unemployment and low business activities in the 1900s. Banks, factories, and shops closed and farms stopped production. In fact, around 300,000 companies went out of business. Millions of people were left jobless and penniless. Many people had to depend on the government or charity to provide them with food. No one knows for sure what caused the Great Depression, but the stock market crash in October of 1929 marked its start, and it lasted 10 years. In fact, the stock market lost almost 90% of its value between 1929 and 1933. Historians and economists give various other causes for the Great Depression, including drought, overproduction of goods, bank failures. Around 11,000 banks failed during the Great Depression, and more than $1 billion in bank deposits were lost, leaving many with no savings, stock speculation, and consumer debt. It is called the Great Depression because it affected so many people for so long. Events in the United States at that time also affected many other countries and led to a worldwide depression. The worst years of the Great Depression were 1932 and 1933. In 1929, unemployment was around 3%. In 1933, it was 25%, with 1 out of every 4 people out of work. Many of the unemployed became sadly homeless because they couldn't afford to pay the mortgage. In vacant lots, they built shelters out of whatever they could find: rusted out cars, packing cartons, pieces of tin, and scrap lumber, for example. Residents often called their shanty towns Hooverville after Herbert Hoover, who was president of the United States when the Great Depression began, and most Americans felt that he didn't do enough to fight the Great Depression. Many organizations ran soup kitchens and gave out free bread to the people that were left jobless and homeless. The International Apple Shippers Association sold surplus apples cheaply to unemployed men. Suddenly, apple peddlers were on almost every street corner selling apples for a nickel apiece to earn enough money for food and clothing. The Great Depression coincided with the greatest agricultural disaster ever to hit the United States. In 1931, drought, a long period of dry weather, and dust storms began to ravage the Great Plains. They did not end until 1937. This area, considered America's breadbasket because of the great amount of wheat grown there, became known as the Dust Bowl. Thousands of farm families were wiped out. With no land to farm and little food to eat, many farmers and their families migrated away from the Dust Bowl region in the Midwest. Around 200,000 migrants moved to California. Dust bowlers who moved to California in the 1930s ended up as migrant workers, traveling around the state picking and packing fruits and vegetables. The New Deal, created by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, was a series of laws, programs, and government agencies enacted to help the country deal with the Great Depression. These laws placed regulations on the stock market, banks, and businesses. They helped put people to work and tried to help house and feed the poor. Many of these laws are still in place today, like the Social Security Act. The New Deal created around 100 new government offices and 40 new agencies and helped millions of Americans survive the hard times. The Great Depression ended with the start of World War II. The wartime economy put many people back to work and filled factories to capacity. The Great Depression has been the subject of many works of art and entertainment. For example, John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath. The musical Annie is based on the popular Depression-era comic strip Little Orphan Annie. Superman was created during the Great Depression, and songwriter E.Y. Harburg summed up the mood of the early 1930s in his popular song, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? The Great Depression left a lasting legacy on the United States. The New Deal law significantly increased the role of the government in people's everyday lives. Also, public works built up the infrastructure of the country with the construction of roads, schools, bridges, parks, and airports. Thanks for watching this Adventurous Kids episode.